All right, how's everyone doing? I am Rich CELENZA. Thanks for tuning into the Rich CELENZA Show. WTF are you talking about? What I want to get into today is regarding parenting. Basically, I'm going to call this segment, Are Your Kids Being Bullied Because of You? And I know a lot of parents may take offense to this or get pissed off by this podcast, but truthfully, I could care less. I've put up in the past some podcasts regarding what I think I went through as a parent and what a lot of parents, I think, are kind of blowing regarding not teaching their kids the streets. They really teach their kids a lot of things about how to behave, how to be, an upstanding citizen, which is wonderful, how to love, how to treat people, how to be caring, respectful, having a wonderful life. But on the other end, they are really missing out because a lot of them components aren't in the real world, if that makes sense, or they're not going to be treated the same way they're being treated in their household. And a lot of parents, I think, miss the beat on that because when your kids enter into the real world, it's not like they're going to be, everyone's going to love them and praise them and treat them the way you may have treated them, or even their siblings, or even friends, or even neighborhood or town. It's not like that, right? And I think a lot of parents know that. But I think what happens a lot of times with parenting is we want to protect our children, which is obvious. We want to keep the innocence with them for as long as possible. But sometimes by doing that, I think we paralyze them, I call that. It becomes unrealistic. We're setting them up to almost be bullied, and if not bullied, setting themselves up to be, I'm not saying taken advantage of, but people to come down on them because they emotionally have not been prepared to take that on. And I think one of the things as a parent you need to teach your kids, and when I say the streets, I don't just mean like, hey, let's walk downtown Chicago or New York. I'm going to take you to travel and we're going to go in some, neighborhoods and this and that. No, I'm telling you how to protect your child. There are tons of predators out there, and I don't mean sexual only. I'm talking people when your kids start to go, even into high school, college, and so on, that are going to want to either sell them drugs, bully them, fight them, get them involved with things they may have never been involved with before that could get them in trouble, make them do things they're afraid of if they don't do, they're not going to fall into the clique, could be even fraternities, all these different types of things, right? You have to prepare your children. And if you don't, somebody else is. I'm going to tell you right now. If you don't prepare your kids for the streets, somebody else is, and it may not be the person you want doing, it may not be the right person. So, let me get some water there. So I'm just going to get into a situation where, how do I say this so I could kind of funnel it into something? I think a lot of people, and this goes for men and women, what happens, I think, is the way we're programmed is we don't want to hurt other people's feelings a lot of times, all right? We don't want problems. But other people don't give a shit about that. And I think this is what happens with a lot of women, too, when they're addressed by a man, making them feel uncomfortable. And that could be even touching them, putting their hands on them, taking advantage of them. Because I think what happens is they become paralyzed again. They don't know what to do. They almost have been programmed to say or think, I can't tell this person no, or I can't stop this because what's he going to feel like? Then how's he going to act? Right? Instead of, if somebody puts you in an uncomfortable position, your automatic response is to stand up for yourself and say, hey, what the fuck are you doing? It may not be in that language, but who do you think you, like, what are you doing? Why'd you put your hand on my leg? I don't feel comfortable in this position. Don't talk to me like that. People are always going to be testing our children. They're probably testing you as well. And no matter what position we're in our life, you or your children, you are going to be in situations where, or crowds, or belong to different groups. That could be in high school, that could be at work, that could be different teams where they're going to fall into a category where you're going to have the alpha, the beta, whatever. You got the guys on top. Where do you stand in this equation? Are you kind of like, I go for out sometimes, but I use the Karate Kid thing. Because it really kind of, if you've ever seen that movie, you have the clique of guys, Johnny and his gang, and then you have LaRusso, and some people, despite if LaRusso was the antagonist, or was he getting bullied, was he bullying? But if you look at that situation, a lot of us are always in those situations as a group? Are you within the group or are you the outsider? If you're the outsider, why are you the outsider? If you're in a group, where do you fall in this category of this group, right? Are you the head of it, the middle, on the end, whatever the case may be? How did you fall into this group? That could be, again, back at work, and if you play on teams, because here's the deal, and I always used to hear this in high school, which I found kind of funny. The jocks pick on the nerds or the geeks, right? To a certain degree, that was kind of true, but I was in, and I had a lot of different friends, I noticed that a lot of whatever group you're in, you have the alpha. And then you have other people, too, in that group bullying other people in that group and testing them all the time. So if it was, I don't care, the debate team, hypothetically, that group, that has nothing to do with jocks, but they are also within that group testing you. They're always testing you. And if you don't teach your kids to stand up for themselves or yourself, you're going to fail. Now, if you don't mind failing, but if you want your kids to really, it's amazing. You want your kids to get into a good college, have a good job, or go start their own business, whatever. You want them to have that confidence. You do not want to let them be confronted by people that make them feel, weak, or make them feel like they're not smart enough or not strong enough, or all these things. And as a parent, I really believe we have to be the ones to teach our kids this. And I grew up in a very different environment, in a situation where I grew up with my mother being very young and my grandmother being exceptionally young, and them two being very strong. Neither one of them were married. So my mother got a divorce at a very young age. My grandmother was extremely young. She got a divorce too. My grandmother had 6 kids. My mother just had me. These were 2 very tough women. And I had uncles, my mother's younger brothers, that weren't too far off of my age, right? So, but they were much bigger and stronger than I was, and they were always fighting, and then I got in the loop of fighting with them. And they would always, even if we got in fights, bare knuckle fist, they wouldn't punch me in the face because they were so much bigger than me, but they would always train me to punch them in the face. I even started taking martial arts at a young age, and then I was wrestling, I was doing everything physical. But I was even put in a lot of situations, and I think all of us end up in these situations. I remember in CCD, that's like if you're Catholic, you go on Sundays to a certain school. Our church was off the beaten trail, so my mother would drop me off at a school. There was only a couple of my friends from my school, but there were all these other groups of kids from there going to that CCD class. So there was like a pack of 6, 7, all different groups. We were on the outskirts. At this CCD class, there was a big kid that was kind of a bully within there, and he didn't really like us because we were from a rival school or whatever. And he would kind of antagonize us or like think he was going to get away with it. And I literally, he said, I'm going to beat your ass or something after school, that typical bullshit. I said, okay. They were all waiting. I think he thought I was going to, avoid him. I walked right out the door, and I punched him about 3 times directly right in his face. Now, I'm not saying that egotistical. These were more kids. I blasted him 3 times, took his head. I think I just kept punching it. Another guy came. I just kept punching him. And then the other guys, usually here's the deal when you're within groups. If there's 5, 6 guys, 3 or 4 are pussies. I'm going to tell you right now. If you can, take out the top dog. If you can. And a lot of times you may get taken out too. Now, I'm not talking groups like if we're within a group of boxers, they're going to all beat the shit out of you. For a football team, they're going to kill you. I'm talking the average people out there that sometimes fall in these groups or categories where you got 2 top guys that are kind of bullies, the bigger, stronger guys, or whatever the case may be. But I was never afraid to punch someone in the face. And I know this sounds ridiculous, but I think when people, especially younger people, they get in fights or someone confronts them physically, they're afraid of hurting the other person more than they are protecting themselves. They're thinking, oh my God, my mom or my dad, or I'm going to get in big trouble if I do this or if that. Or they're waiting for the other person to first put damage on them so they can retaliate. I get that too. But I'm telling you, if you're being bullied, this is an adult or a child, somebody physically starts to confront you, you can obviously go to the police too, but you may find yourself in a position real quick where it's just going down. You've got to program yourself or learn self-defense, how to protect yourself. You need to teach your kids this, and here's the thing too, there's a difference between really knowing how to do it and phony kind of doing it. I know so many phony people that grew up playing video games or thinking they're tough because even if they wrestled or whatever the case may be, and they're really not that tough. They get their asses kicked. I'm talking about your child or you really knowing how to protect yourself under all circumstances. Because again, if you don't protect yourself, a lot of times, who is? Especially if you find yourself at a position by yourself, or even you and your girlfriend, or whatever. I teach that in my Mastering Self-Confidence program, that a lot of women want a man that they know can protect them in certain situations. That doesn't mean if there's 3 guys there, it's hard to beat up 3 guys, even 2 guys compared to 1. But at least they know if you stand your ground. If you stand your ground with anyone, I promise you 99% of the time, it's not going to come down to violence. It's going to come down to arguing or bullshitting, or I'll kick your ass, I'll do this. And I always say, my father taught me that actually too. A lot of times if you're in a position where somebody wants to jam with you, tell them straight up, all right, I'll meet in the back by yourself. Or you got to bring your friends. You got to be a pussy and bring everybody to jump me. A lot of times that person is being confronted. And when he gets confronted one-on-one, he has 2 options: accept it or bow out. Most of the time they will bow out. And I'm going to tell you why. Because they want a crowd. They want to prove to everybody how tough they are. Now, say they do go in the back with you. And I've had this happen many times when I was younger. And what they didn't realize, a lot of times I'd get in fights. But when I go in the back, usually discussions would stop and you wouldn't end up fighting. Because again, there's no crowd there. Right? For the most part, there really isn't. Now, if you just want to beat the shit out of somebody and there's a jam, you may go in the back and fight. But I'm telling you, most of the time, if you can separate yourself, now if you're the bully within a group, you're the asshole who starts these fights and stuff, you're just an asshole. I'm just going to call you out on it. Because a lot of times I believe it's easy to hurt people, okay? It's not easy to help people, right? So I look at it from a doctor's perspective. Doctors can, they're like angels. They help everybody. And then a lot of people out there are just physically hurting people. Why? I have no idea. I think it's an identity crisis to bully people or just prove their worth, which is ridiculous. And I just thought I would throw that in there. Anyways, and especially if you're a leader of a group, or you're the big guy, or the alpha, or whatever the case may be, teach your crew how to have respect for people regardless who they are. I don't care if they're nerds. I don't care if you think they're dorks. I don't care whatever the case may be. Be a little open-minded and learn to help people, not verbally abuse them or any of that bullshit. All right, I promise you, you're going to be way more respected for the most part. Now, if you're in gangs or whatever lifestyle you live outside of that, that's a whole different lifestyle. I'm not talking about that. So I'm not in a gang. I'm not in prison. So I got, there's different ways that they all have of doing certain things, which is understandable. But I'm talking about people out there, the average person out there that is going through certain things. And here's something else too. And regarding your children or programming them, a lot of kids, I believe too, get bullied. Because a lot of times they're assholes. Don't get me wrong, there are a lot of kids out there that I get special needs. I get, certain people that have awkwardness and they have certain, and I get that, those poor kids, and I understand that. I get that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a lot of people or guys that go into certain situations, and no matter what situation they go into, they walk into the room and they're like a jerk. Or they make you feel uncomfortable, or they expect you to cater to them. And if you don't like them immediately, and this goes for a lot of women too, I see it with, they're always, they're a bitch. You don't know how they treat me. They do this to me, they do that to me. And I always wonder a lot of times, how do you treat them? If you keep having problems, no matter where you go, you're the problem. So, and I think a lot of parents got to address their kids, because I've gone through that too with my daughters. A lot of times, you have to show them and say, listen, your behavior is what's making them people sometimes shun you or say certain things to you, because you're making them feel awkward. You're making them feel uncomfortable. You're not, all of us sometimes, not all of us, a lot of us don't realize our behavior sometimes could be attracting people or making people comfortable in the room by even walking in and smiling or shaking hands or whatever, right? Or you got people that walk in that just kind of give you a dirty look, fluff you off and kind of like, get the hell out of here. And then you wonder like, hey, what? Now nobody wants to be around me. How come? Well, figure it out. It's kind of obvious. And I also think no matter who you are, you're going to have to realize in situations in life that every situation is a different situation. Every group is going to be a different group. I went to a high school, for instance, a Catholic high school. Not one of my friends from grade school went there. And I remember first going there, I was on the outs entirely, because every kid there, for the most part, not every kid, but most of the kids there went to Catholic schools, grade schools, and went there, or went to the schools locally and then went there. So obviously I am on the outs. I had to understand, though, I kind of was raised between two places in Chicago, which were all street guys, and then I was in a preppy area, a very preppy area. My mother raised me in as well. I had kind of both going. This high school was really neither one of them. They kind of fell into the middle category. And it was a whole different group of people, which was very interesting. So I had to kind of learn how to adapt in that environment. And again, you can be the outsider for 4 years in high school, or if you decide you want to be more popular, you can do that as well. But a lot of the way we go about things and how we see ourselves within those things is usually how it's going to kind of pan out. And I see a lot of people in high school saying, I hated high school because of this and that. And I get it. A lot of people just didn't fit in high school. I didn't like high school as far as general, like sitting all the time and having to listen to priests, deacons, or brothers. That I get. So I understand that part of it. But then I had other people that like, oh my God, high school years were the best years of my life. I think you kind of make it what you want to make it to a certain degree, right? And I think that's with building relationships too. Teach your kid to build relationships, I believe, with people they feel comfortable around. Because I think a lot of kids end up joining groups or end up in certain situations that they're kind of conned into, or because this group is the only group that's kind of taking a liking to them. And that can be even drugs or alcohol. It can be anything, right? It's not like they're setting their own path. They're kind of wandering around, and they'll start hanging out with who likes them instead of who they want to be around with. If that kind of makes sense. I think so. I kind of described that correctly. So, yeah. But please protect your child from being bullied. And if you know you have a child that kind of is a bully, because a lot of times we do know who the bullies are, even as parents, confront your son or daughter and say, listen, this ain't cool. You don't treat people like this, I believe. You know what I mean? And it's just self-respect, all right? And if you're, to your kids going to take a lot of knocks, they need those knocks. They may need to get in fights once in a while, even physically. They may need to get in arguments with people. They may need to, because that is really what the future is going to be like. You're going to have to fight for yourself, right? You're in America. What did Brad Pitt say in that one movie? When you're in America, you're on your own. You truly are. You cannot always be there for your kids to protect them. Your best job, the best thing you can do is show your kids by example everything that you're going through, how you're handling it. Even if you're going through a divorce, even if you're going through losing your job, even if you're getting confronted by people or you're being bullied or you're bullying people, whatever the case may be, but you're showing them how you handle certain situations because that's where they're learning. A lot of times when you tell your kids, they don't give a shit. You'd be like, hey, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this. When I grew up, that happened and this. And that. They're like, get the fuck out of here, whatever. That was you. You were 30 years ago, 40 years. You think I'm going to listen to you? No. If you show them the way, you don't always have to tell them. That's where they're really going to learn, I believe. Right? You just being honest and also describing to them what you're going through and treating them more like an adult and not always like a superior or like they're naive or kind of babying them. It's ridiculous. And I see this more and more and more. And it's just getting nuts. And I grew up in partly Orlando, Florida. And one thing I can kind of use for an example, and I have a lot of friends from Orlando. If I'm describing this, don't think it's you, people in Orlando. This is over I've been going to Orlando since I was 5. I moved there at 18, but I used to say my kids were professional tourists. So if you grew up in Orlando, Florida, it seemed like a lot of kids, when I moved there at 18, I should say, were kind of really different because a lot grew up in the Disney environment. It's kind of a fun place. They were kind of Disney kids, I guess you could say. They go to the beach. They live a totally different life than Chicago because Chicago is just much different environment, obviously. But as I got older, and I did this with my kids, I got them season tickets to Disney World, SeaWorld, Epcot, Universal, everything. All the water parks. And my kids basically grew up in a fantasy land. And I think a lot of parents, including my friends sometimes, we babied them in that environment. And as they were getting older, I could tell they were more and more spoiled, right? Even though a lot of them did very well in school and they would, sports or whatever the case may be, but I could tell if we took them out of that environment and say threw them in Chicago, New York, or anywhere, they were just like paralyzed. They were shitting in their pants because they were never really, taught that there's such a different lifestyle out there. And I'll even throw Florida back into another category. I have friends there that are like, we goof around, call them the rednecks. And they were hunters. They shoot people. Sorry, they shoot animals. They fish all the time. They do everything outdoors. They love all that, the aspect of that lifestyle, which is awesome. Which, if my girls, if I took them around my buddy who hunts alligators in the woods and kills all these, they were like, oh my God, I can't believe they do that. That's the real world. I wanted my kids to understand. I have friends that are hunters, right? I have friends that live. One of my closest friends who I'm going tonight to watch the fights at owns one of the biggest boxing gyms in Chicago, and the best one. I would take my daughter there. She'd be like in shock. She's like, oh my God, these guys are really fighting in a ring. You want to show your kids that it's just not about, that lifestyle. You've got to show them there's so many different types of people out there. There's so many different types of environments. Culture them. Don't just talk about them. Most kids now, they're either on their computer or reading about things. I've been telling my friends, because I've been fortunate enough to travel all over North America, and I tell my friends all the time, keep taking your kids to different places. Don't just go Chicago, Florida, Chicago, California. Take them to Utah, hypothetically. Take them to Manhattan. Take them maybe to Philly. Take them to Vegas at a young age. Even my friends were laughing at me, and they did take their kids to Vegas, and they had a blast. But my point being is educate your children and also teach them how to be comfortable in many different situations. The more comfortable they are in certain situations, the more they're not going to feel like an outcast. Because a lot of times your kids may go to a different college, or they may marry somebody and go to a different environment. And I've seen this in Florida a lot. A lot of women go, I can't wait, I'm going to move to New York and this and that. They literally last 6 months because they're in culture shock. And I'm not telling you, if you can't afford to do all these things, I get it. But in time, just teach your kids that there's a whole world out there and let them experience different things. That may even include taking them to restaurants that are really good, maybe not in that great of an area, but safe enough to go to, right? Different nationalities or different cultures. I don't care if you take them to different churches, take them to different museums. So anyways, really, take care of your kids, basically. So I'm going to wrap it up there. I'm sweating my ass off. I got to get to the fights tonight. But I just thought I'd throw that in there. And if you get a chance, you can check out my Rich CELENZA YouTube page. It's just my name. I also have a Mastering Self-Confidence program out there. I try to help men build their confidence in many different things. Kind of what I was talking about in this, but it also includes with women. It includes fashion, hygiene, and just different things mentally, how to handle certain situations. I'm also on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn as well. So if you can leave a comment, share it. A lot of you may disagree with me regarding how to raise kids, which I could see that too. You may be like, you're too abrupt. But the one thing my mother used to say to me all the time is because, she's like, you talk to your kids like they're adults. And I'll never forget that. She always used to say that. And then at other times, my mother would be like, you're babying your kids. And I get there's a fine line there because I think that's where I was kind of. But there is somewhere in the middle. Because I know a lot of us do want to still baby our kids. We want them to, they have to earn. If they don't earn things, they're not going to respect it. And I keep going through this with my youngest daughter. I want her to pay for a lot of things. And she's the one who really gravitated to her saying, wow, you're right. If I didn't pay for this car, I would have never taken care of it the way I did. If I didn't, accomplish this the harder way, if you just gave it to me, or that could be buying anything. She values it so much more because she earned it. She had to fight her way through it. And when it comes to your kids, I get we want to spoil them. We always, I think, want to give them a better life than we had, for the most part. We also want them to be kind of a part of us, like a mini-me version of us to a certain degree. And also we want them to, become whoever they are, right? But we have to understand they are going to be on their own. And when they're on their own, everything is coming at them the same way it came at you, and that's going to shape them the way it shaped you. And I understand, again, we want to protect them. And that's our number one goal in life. And to truly protect them, they have to learn how to protect themselves, right? They have to learn how to value themselves. And again, they have to learn the value of a dollar, what the value is to get good grades. And you see all these scandals going on with these kids getting into universities or colleges that they don't belong in. I'm quite the opposite. I get sometimes if you want to help your kids get something that maybe they don't deserve at the time because they're doing well or whatever the case, maybe you feel like giving it to them. But you've got to show your kids the right way to do things. I believe if you don't get into that university the way you should have gotten into it, you don't belong there, right? So one thing I will say about sports that I love so much, you cannot ever, ever, ever fake being a professional athlete. That is one thing in this world. You've got guys that are CEOs, CFOs, presidents of many different companies, whatever you want to say, vice presidents that were either born into certain families or, actors. A lot of them aren't as great as they are, but their family members were. They could be royalty, or they just, something happened, they became famous, and now they're in movies or television or on news. And I'm not dismissing that. There's a lot of incredible people out there that, they get what they deserve. They belong there. But a lot of people could sneak in and out of things that don't belong in certain positions. But when it comes to a professional athlete, you cannot fake that. Go up to the mound when somebody's pitching 100 miles per hour. Can't fake it. Go into a basketball game. Go onto a football field. That cannot be faked. My point being here is teach your kids, right, if they want to achieve for greatness, there's the right way of doing things, and it starts with you. All right, I'm going to wrap it up there. Take care, and if you're traveling, safe travels.